September 6, 1995. It's the bottom of the fifth in Camden Yards. Mike Messina, for the Baltimore Orioles, digs his cleats into the mound as he delivers his fourth pitch to California Angels Damian Easley. We're 1 out away from one of the greatest moments in baseball and sports history. And the center of this moment, shortstop Cal Ripken Jr., stands crouched, as always, to the left of second base, ready for action. Up high on the brick wall of the B&O warehouse in right field hang 4 giant numbers, 2, 1, 3, and 0. After the next out, someone will reach over and dislodge that 0 at the end, revealing the number 1, which is the representation of something that has never happened in the sport. Most records in baseball are unpredictable. You never know when someone is going to get a base hit, or steal second, or throw a strikeout, or smack one out of the park. But this record was known for years. Not that it was inevitable, just predictable. But sometimes, when you know what's coming, it only adds to the tension. Mike Messina winds up, delivers. The ball never reaches the glove, because Damian Easley connects, driving a weak fly to shallow right field. 2 outs turns to 3, and the top of the fifth is complete. And since the hometown Orioles are winning, the game is now official. Cal Ripken Jr. has accomplished a feat begun 13 years earlier, on May 30th, 1982. With 2,131 consecutive games played, he surpassed a record set 56 years earlier, in 1939, by the most honored, well-respected, beloved player ever to don a Major League uniform, Lou Gehrig.
And let it be said that number 8, Cal Ripken Jr., has reached the unreachable star.
As the Orioles jog off the field, the sold-out crowd of 46,272 fans erupts into a deafening cacophony of clapping and shouting and whistling, every man, woman, and child on their feet. Cal Ripken Jr. does not seem fazed. No smile, no overwhelmed, shocked look on his face. Just the expression of a ball player jogging to the dugout to prepare for just another appearance at the plate. But as he reaches the steps of the dugout, Ripken leaks his first smile and shakes hands with some of his teammates. Watching this scene with no sound, you might think he just made a nice play on the field. You wouldn't think he just broke one of the greatest, most awe-inspiring records in sports history. After a few more handshakes, Ripken steps onto the field and removes his cap and waves to the cheering fans. Then he walks over and removes his jersey, hands it to his daughter, and disappears into the dugout for a fresh shirt. Time to get back to the game. But the fans aren't close to ready. They continue to shout, to clap, and so he reemerges to give another wave. Maybe this will be enough, the humble shortstop thinks. Is he oblivious to the magnitude of this moment? That's hard to believe. Maybe he's shocked into a daze, unable to comprehend that all of these thousands and thousands of fans are endlessly cheering for him. Not for a play he made, but for the man he has consistently shown to the world. Again and again he waves, and again he disappears. But the crowd continues to cheer, continues to scream his name. Cal, Cal, Cal. Finally, his teammates Bobby Bonilla and Rafael Palmeiro push a hesitant Cal Ripken Jr. toward the adoring fans. Slowly, Ripken circles the field, shaking hundreds of hands, returning smiles and grins at the faces staring back at him. A few people tumble out of the stands and onto the field because they were leaning so far out just to touch the legend who's worked 13 years to create this singular moment in sports history. 46,000 fans may seem like a lot, but it's nothing compared to the millions and millions watching across the country, where all Major League ball games have stopped to celebrate this incredible achievement. Television networks air the celebration without commercial interruption for 22 minutes. Just a year earlier, a devastating strike soured millions of fans to the game of baseball. And now, tonight, people across the country, people around the world, pay tribute to the beauty and heart and glory of the game like never before. This is the story of two men living parallel lives across the span of 50 years. This is the story of blessings and burdens, of contradicting values, of grit and recklessness in the face of overwhelming opposition. This is the story of a statistic equally ridiculed and worshipped. And while there are many perspectives on the consecutive game streak, most wholeheartedly agree that what we saw on September 6, 1995, we are likely to never, ever see again. This is the story of the streak. You're listening to the Midnight Library of Baseball, where there's no loud music, no jarring sounds, only nostalgic, thought-provoking, emotional stories about baseball. I'm Ben Orlando. What is the allure of the consecutive games played streak? On the surface, and compared to other records, it sounds boring. It's just some athlete doing what they're supposed to do. And at times, Cal Ripken Jr. looked at it this way, looked at himself as a blue-collar worker, getting up in the morning, going to work, doing the job, coming home, going to bed, and then doing it again the next day. Most ball players accept the repetition, the ritual of the long season, but the vast majority don't connect their identity and the core of themselves to showing up every day for years. Even as early as the 1920s, playing in every game wasn't seen by most as what you were supposed to do. Babe Ruth, who mocked Gehrig's streak, said ball players weren't paid to play every day. They were paid to play most days. You didn't get a bonus for perfect attendance. But the unglamorous nature of this record is the very reason it, and the players who attempt it, are so admired. Because most people are not exceptional athletes. They have to grind through each day. They have to endure. If you're listening, you may have a job that you don't like, or even if you do like it, you'd prefer more days off than you actually get. But you have to keep doing it. You have to get up when you don't want to. You have to roll out of bed when you want to sleep just one more hour, one more minute. In baseball, to play 1,000 or even 500 games without a break, players have to endure fatigue, injuries, slumps, and pressures from thousands of people screaming for them to stop because it makes no sense, because they're not helping anyone by simply staying out there too long. Journalist Buster Olney said Cal Ripken Jr. was the most selfish player he'd ever covered. And this is a question. Was a player helping or hurting his team by staying in the lineup? And after a certain point, was the decision taken out of the hands of the manager? After a certain point, was it inevitable that Gehrig or Ripken was going to play, no matter their performance? There's also the aspect of wanting control over the chaos. Over the course of baseball history, hundreds of players set out on the same journey to dictate their own terms, to say, I stop when I say it's time to stop, and I want to see truly how far I can push myself. And it makes sense. Life is chaos. Even in a controlled environment like baseball, there are so many factors out of your control. And here's one element within your control to say, today, even though I feel run down, achy, low, I'm going to make the choice to play. Steve Garvey, who ranks fourth all time on the list with 1,207 consecutive games, said he absolutely wanted to break Lou Gehrig's record. And Everett Scott, whose streak ended soon after Gehrig joined the Yankees, also would have kept going. But here's where the chaos stepped in, where, in the act of wanting control more than anything, you ultimately had to concede to the chaos. For Steve Garvey, it was a broken finger, caused, in his words, by a freak play. One accident through no fault of his own ended Garvey's dream. And we're talking years here. It's not like you can just say, okay, let's start again. When Garvey realized his broken finger was going to keep him from playing, that was it. With one crushing moment of recognition, it was over. For Everett Scott, his end might have been even more painful because it didn't have to happen. Yankees manager Miller Huggins benched Scott when he wasn't performing. And you might say, well, Scott did have control of his fate. He could have played better. But sitting a game or two does not equal the end of a slump. There is no secret formula. Some people improve by playing through a slump. But in this case, Scott wasn't given the choice. His identity was tied to this streak, and just like that, it was ripped out of his hands. But what was going on for Gehrig and Ripken and others pursuing the streak when it no longer was just about the dignity of continuing the ritual? Now, when you woke in the morning, there might be the question, who am I if I don't continue the streak? But again, sometimes the choice is taken out of your hands. You can train, you can make yourself strong and flexible, you can eat right, get your sleep. But in the end, the streak often comes down to luck or fate. One might say luck shined upon Lou Gehrig to allow him to take the streak so far. But then again, look what happened to him in the end. The thing is, it only takes one miss, one sit out, one injury. If you don't strike someone out, you can do it the next time, and the number grows. If you don't hit a home run for 20 straight games, you can still go on to hit 100 more. But for this particular record, you miss one game, and that's it. Pete Rose is a great example. Rose played all the time. He holds the record for most games played in a career, 3,562. That's 561 more than Cal Ripken, and it's almost 1,400 more than Lou Gehrig. You'd think if anyone was going to break this record, it would be Pete Rose. From 1973 to 1982, an entire decade, Rose missed only 4 games in a decade. But in the end, he didn't come close to breaking Gehrig's record. In fact, he ranks only 12th all time for consecutive games played. Of all the records in baseball, in professional sports, this is the most complicated. But to find out why, we have to go back to the beginning. To ask the question, is perseverance still heroic if nobody notices? In the next segment, I'll be talking about a pitcher from the 1880s named Old Hoss Radbourn, who ranks second all-time for most innings pitched in a season and ranks 19th all-time for career wins. But this got me to thinking, should he be? Is it fair to compare Old Hoss Radbourn and other players of his time to Walter Johnson, Bob Feller, Nolan Ryan, or Greg Maddux? In my latest Extra Innings episode, I discussed the obvious and overlooked factors that make this such a challenging question. Available to subscribers at patreon.com/Midnight Library of Baseball. Also, if you like the show, tell a friend, tell 10, and write a review or donate if you can. Okay, back to the show. Did you ever wonder where the term Iron Man comes from? A runner? A decathlete? A track and field star? No, it comes from a ball player. In the late 1800s, there were many sports in which athletes were accomplishing amazing feats of endurance, but baseball wasn't seen as one of them. According to John Eisenberg in his book, The Streak, quote, in its first few decades, baseball seemed incapable of producing staggering endurance tales. Most games were over in less than 2 hours, and even though the season lasted months, the players sat on benches when not batting or playing the field. How tough was that? End quote. Now, clearly Eisenberg is poking fun at this perception, but it is funny, right? Because these same players were fielding the ball with their bare hands. They were stepping to the plate without helmets, with no protective equipment, and limited medical resources to heal their constant injuries. They were persevering, playing through enormous physical, mental, and emotional setbacks. And nobody noticed. But we have to view baseball and baseball players through the lens of their time. And people of this time were tough. They worked in the fields or mines or factories all day, 6 days a week. So they didn't see it as special or unusual for ball players to play without protection or to rest very little. Remember an earlier episode of mine when a college ball player first wore a face mask as a catcher? The fans laughed at him. They mocked him for being weak. And this mentality of play until you drop was especially prevalent with pitchers. Take Charles Radbourn, nicknamed Old Hoss, who pitched a ridiculous number of innings. For a baseline, let's look at the major league leader in innings pitched in 2024. It was Logan Gilbert of the Seattle Mariners, who pitched 208 innings. That's equal to 23 complete 9-inning games. In 1882, Old Hoss Radbourn pitched 466 innings. In 1883, he pitched 632 innings. And in 1884, he pitched 678 innings. That's nearly half a major league season worth of complete games. And what makes this number even more impressive is that Radbourn played in a time when foul balls didn't count as strikes. And it was an actual strategy for batters to foul off pitch after pitch to wear down the pitcher. Pitch counts didn't exist at the time, but in 1884, Radbourn was likely throwing 300 pitches, if not more, every game. Now, it gets pretty complicated when you start comparing a professional ball player from the 1880s to players in the 1900s. And I'll get into these comparisons in the next Extra Innings episode. But even with these different rules, you can't ignore Radbourn's insane accomplishments. In 1884, he pitched 73 complete games. His record for the season was 60 wins and 12 losses. He threw 441 strikeouts, and his ERA, after all that pitching was 1.38. You'd think a guy, after this kind of season, would just drop dead from fatigue. Radbourn didn't drop dead, but he clearly would have suffered from the strains of performing all the time. He was known as a very irritable man. He was a raging alcoholic. And I think I'd be irritable and drink if I had to pitch 73 games a season. And something certainly took its toll because Radbourn died at the age of 42. It wasn't that people of the time completely ignored Radbourn. He was a big deal. He was celebrated. He was honored. But his endurance feats were not aspirational to fans and other players. They were just part of the game. In fact, some people believed that what Radbourn did, every pitcher could do and should do. There's a book on Old Hoss Radbourn by Edward Acorn called 59 in 84. And it's 59, not 60, because there's some debate whether he won 59 or 60 games. But, at that point, does it really matter? But Acorn includes this great quote from Henry Chadwick, delivered after the 1884 season. And keep in mind, Chadwick is known as the father of baseball. He was a writer, journalist, and very influential in the early days of the game. And this is what he had to say after Radbourn's unbelievable season of 678 innings, 73 complete games, and 60 wins. Quote, "What is the work of a first-class pitcher during a season's campaign? Why, nothing more than 9 innings of pitching once a day, occupying less than 2 hours of labor out of the 24, during an average of 4 days a week. Why, it is simply nonsense to assert that this is an arduous task for any man of the healthy class of athletics who compose the leading pitchers of the day. What Radbourn has done, they can all do." End quote. Chadwick went on to say that Radbourn and Charlie Sweeney, his pitching teammate, were pulling off a scam by switching out every day. Isn't this crazy? The Providence Grays had 2 pitchers. That was it. And Chadwick was saying 2 was too much. He said they were being lazy, and Radbourn could have pitched every day if he wanted to. Chadwick's view wasn't every view. The Fall River Daily Evening News wrote, quote, "Next year will be the time when his arm will show whether it has been injured or not." End quote. So they and a lot of people were wondering if Radbourn had thrown his arm out. And he didn't, but he definitely injured it because over the next couple seasons, he threw less and less until he stopped. But think about what Chadwick said. "I'd love to share this quote with major league pitchers today and see their reactions. That pitchers should be pitching every day," right? I mean, can you imagine? Henry Chadwick's view was widespread. And if everyone didn't believe that Radbourn and other pitchers should be pitching every day, they certainly didn't revere the commitment. And this widespread sentiment, when it came to consistent, frequent play, continued for years. It wasn't until 1903 when people finally started to take notice and comment on endurance. And it came with a player named Joe McGinnity, who Eisenberg described as, quote, "a chubby right-hander for the New York Giants," end quote. In 1903, McGinnity pitched 434 innings and won 31 games. Now, this is no 600, but at this time it was seen as a lot because a lot had changed in the 20 years between Old Hoss Radbourn and Joe McGinnity. Baseball had become more refined, with more pitchers in the rotation. It had become more specialized so that pitchers were not in the field. They were taking time off. They were focusing on pitching. Radbourn was a bona fide workhorse, but he didn't have one thing that Joe McGinnity had, and that was a national audience. By 1903, the press was covering and writing about baseball every day. Statistics were still limited, but they were noting them more often. And Joe McGinnity was seen as a big deal. He pitched well, and he pitched often. And the whole country was interested in not only his performance, but his endurance. And when a journalist asked McGinnity what he did during the offseason, McGinnity said, quote, "I'm an iron man. I work in a foundry." End quote. McGinnity's wife's family owned an iron factory where he worked in the off-season. And when he was playing, he consistently pitched back-to-back days or even double headers in the same day. His arm was said to be made out of iron. And so, to the press, Joe McGinnity became the first Iron Man. And again, by this time, pitchers were not playing every day. They were not going into the field. So even with this awareness by journalists and fans, statistics surrounding endurance and endurance streaks were still not really followed. Statistics in general were very basic. It would be nearly 2 decades before a man made it his life's mission to wake up baseball and the public to the relevance and virtue of the consecutive game streak. And once he sounded the alarm, baseball would never be the same. Next time, the story of Al Monroe Elias, a man ahead of his time when it came to statistics. And we'll check back to Cal Ripken Jr. What made him so competitive, and what made him trade his spot as a top pitching prospect for a chance to play a position he couldn't really play. We'll end tonight with a listener baseball story. Tonight's story comes from Rob Scheinkoff, published in the book Hey Mom, Wanna Have a Catch? Edited by Rob Scheinkoff. The story is titled Hank Sauer Returns to Syracuse. In the early 1960s, the Syracuse Chiefs held an old-timers game at MacArthur Stadium, and my father bought tickets in advance. I was about 12 years old, and this was a really big deal, since Dad worked 7 days a week, and we rarely got to spend quality time together, and almost never at a baseball game. My dad owned a business on Syracuse West Side, Maury's Variety Corner, a small convenience store before convenience stores were even a thing, and where he bought, sold, and fixed televisions, and provided a neighborhood hangout just across the street from the Delaware Baptist Church. My mother worked with him on weekends, and every kid in the neighborhood knew my mom and dad as Mr. and Mrs. Maury. They saw my dad as a celebrity, as their hero, because his store was the center of the universe. Around the 5th inning, Dad took us for a walk to stretch our legs and get a hot dog. Approaching the concession area, we saw former Chicago Cub great and Syracuse Chiefs Hall of Famer Hank Sauer signing autographs. He was mobbed by what seemed to be a million kids. I thought, how am I ever going to get through that crowd to get him to sign my ball? But upon spotting my father, the kids started yelling, "It's Mr. Maury! It's Mr. Maury!" And they promptly left Hank Sauer and ran for my dad. They were so excited, jumping all over him like my dog Homer did to me when I would return from throwing trash down the chute at the end of our hallway. While the kids mobbed my father, I saw an opportunity to get a big leaguer's autograph and approached the bewildered Hank Sauer, who, while starting to sign a ball I had brought with me, mumbled under his breath, "Who is Mr. Maury?" I replied, "Oh, he's nobody. He's just my dad," hoping Hank would stay on task and finish signing my ball. He didn't. Hank stopped signing and took me by the arm, and for some reason I couldn't understand, he seemed angry. Hank walked me toward the mob of kids surrounding my dad and introduced himself. He and my dad shook hands and exchanged some words inaudible to young ears like mine. And then Hank took it upon himself to lecture me, rather publicly, letting me and everyone within earshot know that my father apparently was far more than a nobody, since the kids left him, this big-shot ball player, to greet their real hero. The lecture probably lasted no more than a minute or two, but seemed to go on for hours, and my dad apparently liked what Hank had to say. Dad let Hank drone on without interruption. I was bored, but glad he finally finished autographing my ball, after which Hank spent a couple of minutes chatting with my father about what I couldn't imagine. What did they have in common? I just wanted to get back to the game that was going on without us. I learned a valuable lesson that day and got to spend a rare occasion sharing my passion for baseball with my dad. And thanks to Hank Sauer, I understood you don't have to be a great baseball player to be a hero. I wish I could have somehow recorded Hank's sermon, as I'm sure there were life lessons that went over my 12-year-old head that would have real meaning today. As I look back, I think I was embarrassed by the lecture from Hank in front of my father and all those kids. If not, I should have been. When I was 26, my parents died 7 weeks apart. They were way too young, but I thought of them as old. I was honored to be asked to say a few words and told this story at the memorial. Several of those kids from that night were on hand, by then in their early 20s and beyond, and told me afterwards that they remembered the evening they saw my dad at MacArthur Stadium. Nobody but I could remember that the 1952 National League MVP was there as well. Maybe they were just being kind, and they didn't want to remind me of that humiliating public smackdown I was given by Hank Sauer. Either way, I suspect they may have forgotten that part of the evening. But I never will. This story by Rob Scheinkoff, again, comes from the recent publication, Hey Mom, Wanna Have a Catch? A compilation of meaningful baseball stories. That's all for tonight. Stay tuned for episode 15 to find out how the consecutive game streak went from being ignored to mocked to celebrated and revered, and what it takes for someone to attempt a record most players wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Next time on the Midnight Library of Baseball. The show is produced and edited by me, Ben Orlando. Music by Sergei Papkin and Ashot Danielian at Pixabay. Good night.